Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and I'd like to welcome you to the other side of history. Now, in our last talk in this series on the life of Jesus Christ, we left off with the death of King Herod. As soon as it was known that Herod was near his death, there were several Pharisees that hurried into the temple and they tore down the golden eagle which Herod had put up over the large main entrance gate of the temple. So to the Jews, this eagle, this symbol of Roman authority, it was regarded as a graven image. And they were determined, the Jewish people, they were determined to get rid of this eagle. Now, when Herod heard about this, that it had been torn down, even though he was literally on his deathbed, he ordered soldiers to stop the riot and to kill the instigators. The eagle, it was put back on the gate. Now, when the Jews discovered that Herod's vicious son, whose name was Archelaus, he was to be Herod's successor over Judea, there was actually a revolt that ensued. Archelaus was just as cruel and bloodthirsty as his father, Herod. But on top of that, he had none of Herod the Great's capabilities. Herod's capabilities as a ruler gained him that title, Herod the Great. This Archelaus, he had no ability as a leader, and he was only like his father in that he was cruel, and he was barbarous and tyrannical. Now, Archelaus, he found the rebels that had been encamped in tents that were around the temple, and he killed 3,000 of them. The government auditor, he happened actually to be temporarily there in town when this mass murder took place, and he took advantage of the presence of the Roman soldiers that were in Jerusalem. Knowing that the Roman soldiers would protect him, this government auditor, he robbed the temple treasury of 400 talents of silver. Now, of course, this was to the Jews just like throwing gasoline onto a fire. The rioting Jews, they were after the thief. And he, as well as those that were with him, they barely escaped with their lives. Now, during all of this chaos, Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus, they were there in Egypt. The revolt had spread throughout the countryside and had even reached Bethlehem. Government palaces throughout all of Judea, they were plundered and they were set ablaze. The governor of Syria, he added his troops to stop the uprising, and as soon as his army approached the city there of Jerusalem, the rebels, they fled through the opposite gates. In hot pursuit, the soldiers, they captured them in droves. There were bands of Jewish patriots who had gathered out in the countryside. They killed any Jews or Gentiles who appeared to be in support there of Rome. One such band was under the direction of a man whose name was Judas. And the Bible talks about him in Acts chapter 5, verse 37. It says, after this man rose up, Judas of Galilee, in the days of the taxing, and drew away many people after him. He also perished, and all, even as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. So this Jewish rebel, Judas, also led several hundred people out into the desert, and he gained so much power that he captured an entire town. However, all of this blood, it just created more blood. 20,000 soldiers entered Palestine and ransacked hundreds of towns. There were 2,000 rebels that were crucified, and then 30,000 Jews were sold into slavery. So just take a guess how long all of this warfare and carnage continued. It was for 9 long years. It's a long time. Micah had predicted that Christ would be born in Bethlehem, but it did not say that he would be raised there in Bethlehem. Micah 5:2 says, "But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth have been from the old, from everlasting." However, nothing is said about Jesus being raised in Bethlehem. Nazareth had been the hometown of both Joseph and Mary. And just as God told Joseph in that dream to flee into Egypt, he told Joseph in another dream to return to Nazareth. Now, their return to Nazareth was prior to the banishment of Herod's son, this Archelaus. Now, Archelaus, his rule did finally come to an end when the Jews finally they managed to dethrone him. Now, Nazareth is about 64 miles north of Jerusalem. The town is in the saddle, or kind of like a hollow, of a not too steep hillside. The hill, it faces southward into a very broad plain. Now, nearly the entire town is on the side of this hill. I guess everyone was hoping to be able to have a view from the hill. The old Nazareth, it lies even further up the hill than the modern Nazareth of today. Now, the population of Nazareth today is about 77,000 people. But in Jesus' day, it is thought that it was a very tiny little town of only around 400 people. If you walk to the very top of the hill there, you can see the Mediterranean Sea off to the west. And I believe in Jesus' day, it would have been a very beautiful view to see. I'm thinking that Jesus may have often climbed to the top of this hill during his personal hours of worship. It would have been refreshing for Jesus to turn aside from the scene of his labor and to go into the field and to meditate there in the green valleys. It is really very wonderful to be able to hold communion with God on a mountainside or amid the trees of a forest. I'm sure that the quiet early hours of the morning would often find Jesus in some secluded place, meditating and searching the scriptures, and also, of course, in prayer. Now, from these quiet hours, he would have been able to return to his home refreshed and to take up his duties again as an example of patient toil. Now, I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but I personally find that there is something so special about being able to be out in the quiet of nature, just surrounded by trees and grass and birds. In the quiet place of nature, I personally feel closer to God, surrounded by the beauty of his creation. It is important that all of us have a quiet season of communion there with our Heavenly Father. Now, of course, all throughout the day, we can lift our hearts to God, but let's not forget to have some just quiet, solitary time each day that is in prayer and meditation. It is good for families, of course, to come together and to have family worship. But we also need to have our own individual time with God, alone. This is very important. Now, Herod's son, Antipas, had been given the rulership of Galilee, which included Nazareth. Now, remember that this was the same time that Herod Antipas, who later beheaded John the Baptist, And it's also the same Herod Antipas who later he officiated in one of the trials there of Jesus Christ. When Joseph, Mary, and the baby Jesus returned to Nazareth, there was still strife. Now remember, this Archelaus, he had not been removed from office yet, though the Jews, they were determined to get rid of him. So Archelaus was intolerably vicious. And this warfare between the Jews and the Romans, it continued without stopping until finally in 6 AD. Now, at this time, there was a delegation of some of the leading Jews, and they journeyed to Rome and they begged Caesar Augustus to abolish the kingship of Judah and to place the nation under procurators directly answerable to Rome. Caesar Augustus, he seemed to be a fairly good and a reasonable man. Remember, he was smart enough to not get involved with the wiles of Queen Cleopatra. Augustus, he agreed with the Jewish leader's proposal, and he immediately removed this Archelaus from rulership there in Judea. He made it a Roman province of a second class, and he put it under a procurator that was responsible to the governor of Syria. So Augustus knew that the people had a right to complain about the rulership of this Archelaus. Everyone knew that he was barbarous and he was tyrannical. Augustus had him banished to a place in Gaul, which is today we know as modern France. It was only when this happened that peace was able to finally return to the Roman provinces there of Judea and Galilee. Matthew chapter 2, verses 19 through 23, it says, "And when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead, which sought the young child's life. And he arose, and took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither, notwithstanding being warned of God in a dream. He turned aside into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene." End quote. So just as God told Joseph to return there, and also, first of all, to flee into Egypt, he said, return to Nazareth. Now, my question is, are you making sure that you are right with God and building a relationship with him so that he can talk to you just like he talked to Joseph? Nothing is too big or too hard for God. With him, we know that all things are possible. So God, he puts kings on their throne, and he dethrones them. He removes them. It was God who removed that tyrannical Archelaus from his throne. It was God who saved the baby Jesus from the hand of Herod. It was God who directed a safe time for Joseph and for Mary to go back to their home there in Nazareth with Jesus. So God, he wants to direct our lives too. Will we let him? I hope you have enjoyed this little talk. If you have, I would just like to encourage you to click on that like and that subscribe button. Leave your comments. I just am wanting to thank you for listening, and I'm just praying that God blesses you and you have a wonderful rest of your day.